What if everything you've been told about God was only a fragment of a much deeper truth? What if beneath the surface of traditional religion lies a forgotten path, one that teaches not obedience, but direct communion with the divine, not fear, but inner illumination? And what if that path was silenced, buried, and branded heresy, not because it was false, but because it was too powerful? Welcome, seeker of truth. Tonight, we unlock a door hidden for centuries, a door that leads to one of the most mystical and controversial branches of spiritual knowledge, Gnosticism. To some, Gnosticism is a long-dead heresy. To others, it is the original fire of divine wisdom, snuffed out by empires, yet still glowing in the hearts of those who dare to remember. But why was it so threatening to the early Christian church? Why did the scrolls, the teachings, and the mystics of this path face suppression so severe it echoes across history? The answer lies not just in politics or theology, but in the nature of power itself. Because Gnosticism doesn't teach you to worship a god from afar. It teaches you to awaken the God within. It doesn't tell you to kneel before external authority. It invites you to ascend through knowledge, Gnosis, a sacred knowing that can only be felt, never dictated. In this journey, we'll explore the real reasons Gnosticism was banned, unveiling the hidden war between mystic insight and institutional control. We'll trace its origins, decipher its symbols, and confront the radical idea at its core that salvation doesn't come from obedience to dogma, but from remembering who you truly are. So light a candle, still your mind, and open your inner ear, because what we're about to explore may forever alter how you view spirit, soul, and self. This is not just history, this is remembrance. To understand why Gnosticism became a forbidden path, we must first journey back, not just to the birth of Christianity, but to the spiritual atmosphere of the ancient world, where mystery schools, sacred rites, and inner alchemy flourished beneath the surface of civilization. Gnosticism didn't arise in isolation. It was born at the crossroads of many sacred streams: Egyptian mysticism, Platonic philosophy, Zoroastrian dualism, early Judaic mysticism, and the teachings of initiates who passed their wisdom not through temples, but through inner transmission. The term Gnosis comes from the Greek meaning knowledge, but not just intellectual understanding. This was a living knowledge, an inner illumination, the kind one awakens in silence through revelation, meditation, and direct contact with the divine. Gnostics believed that each soul is a fragment of the divine source, trapped in the illusions of matter but capable of awakening. The material world, to them, was not created by a benevolent god, but by a lesser being, a Demiurge, who forged the physical realm as a prison of limitation and forgetfulness. This is where Gnosticism diverged sharply from the emerging Christian orthodoxy. While early church leaders taught obedience to a singular external God, Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, and Pistis Sophia whispered something else entirely, something dangerous. They taught that divinity is not found in external worship, but in inner awakening. That salvation comes not through rituals or sacraments, but through personal gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of the divine spark within. And this wasn't metaphorical. The Gnostics described realms beyond the veil of ordinary perception, spiritual planes, emanations of divine light, and beings of higher consciousness. Their texts were rich in symbolism, mystical metaphors, and esoteric codes meant only for the initiated. In their cosmology, the Demiurge, often symbolized as Yaldabaoth, was a blind, arrogant creator, mistaking himself for the ultimate god. And yet, even in this flawed creation, there remains a hidden seed, a divine flame buried deep within the human soul. This flame, they believed, could be rekindled through Gnosis, through inner transformation, and through a sacred remembrance of one's origin in the pleroma, the realm of true light. Such teachings were not just spiritual, they were revolutionary, because they challenged not only religious orthodoxy, but the very structure of control. They taught self-liberation over obedience, enlightenment over dogma, and most dangerously, they taught that no priest, no bishop, no emperor could stand between a soul and its creator. This was the seed of spiritual sovereignty, a concept far too subversive for a church seeking political power and uniform doctrine. So, as Christianity moved from underground movement to imperial religion under Rome, a great purge began. The mystical gospels were declared heretical. The inner teachings were driven into the shadows, and those who dared to preserve the light of Gnosis were branded enemies of God. But truth, as we know, does not die. It only hides, waiting for those who still seek it. Imagine a world where the very God you are taught to worship is not the source of your liberation, but the architect of your prison. This is not a metaphor, it is the radical core of Gnostic philosophy, and it is here that the path diverges sharply from what most would call religion. In Gnostic cosmology, creation is not the flawless act of a benevolent deity, but the fractured consequence of separation, a divine fall, a cosmic forgetting. According to the Apocryphon of John, one of the most profound Gnostic texts, there existed a realm before creation, a realm of fullness called the pleroma, the limitless light where divine emanations called aeons flowed in perfect harmony. But from this harmony, something unexpected occurred. One aeon, Sophia, whose name means wisdom, desired to create without her divine counterpart. From this solitary act emerged a being incomplete and distorted. Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, ignorant of his origin, arrogant in his illusion of supremacy. Believing himself to be the only god, Yaldabaoth shaped the material world, a realm of separation, entropy, and illusion. And here is the Gnostic heresy in its purest form, that the physical world is not the highest reality, but a distorted echo of the true spiritual realm. That the God of the Old Testament, the one who punishes, dominates, and demands submission, may not be the ultimate divine source, but rather the blind creator of limitation. To the early church, this was not just heretical, it was blasphemous, because if the God they preached was not supreme, their authority dissolved with him. But Gnostics saw beyond authority. They believed the human soul contains a divine spark, a fragment of the pleroma itself, buried beneath layers of illusion and forgetfulness. This world, then, is a kind of dream, a labyrinth, and the purpose of life is not to obey the rules of the dream, but to awaken from it. They taught that the soul is not fallen, but asleep, that sin is not disobedience, but ignorance, and salvation, not forgiveness granted from above, but awakening ignited from within. This is why Gnostic teachings are so different from traditional doctrines. They are not about morality or law, but about remembering the light we came from, the falsehood we're entangled in, and the path back to the divine source. This knowledge was never meant for the masses, not because it was elitist, but because it required inner readiness, a ripening of the soul. Many Gnostic texts use parables, riddles, and hidden meanings. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, does not tell stories of miracles or divine judgment. It contains cryptic sayings meant to trigger insight. In one passage, it reads, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. But the kingdom is within you, and it is outside you." This single verse defies all externalized religion. It dissolves temples, collapses thrones, and places the sacred flame not in a church, but in your own breath. And so the question must be asked, if the truth is within, what becomes of the systems that claim to mediate it? The early church could not tolerate a path that made priests irrelevant. Gnosis does not need confession booths. It does not require approval. It is the ultimate inner rebellion. The refusal to be ruled by anything but the voice of divine remembrance echoing from the soul. To understand the full depth of Gnostic teachings, we must let go of surface interpretation and begin seeing the world the way a mystic sees it, not as solid reality, but as layers of symbolic meaning. Everything in Gnosticism is metaphor, and everything is code. The serpent in Eden, the divine feminine, the fall of man. These are not mere stories, they are symbols pointing to the inner workings of consciousness itself. Take, for instance, the story of the Garden of Eden. In Orthodox Christianity, the serpent is the deceiver, the bringer of sin, the cause of humanity's fall. But in many Gnostic interpretations, the serpent is not evil, it is the liberator, it is the awakener. It is the symbol of Gnosis, of forbidden knowledge that breaks the illusion of blind obedience. In this vision, the true fall did not occur because humanity disobeyed God. It occurred when humanity forgot its divine origin and became trapped in matter. The serpent was not the villain. It was the whisper of truth echoing through a controlled narrative. And Eve, she was not a naive transgressor, but the first seeker, the first to taste from the tree of knowledge and glimpse the light hidden behind illusion. Such reversals are common in Gnostic cosmology. Everything is inverted. What is called good is often blindness. What is called evil is often awakening. This inversion is precisely what made Gnosticism so threatening. It challenged the moral dualism used by institutions to control the collective psyche. The Gnostics didn't see sin as the breaking of divine law. They saw it as identification with illusion. They didn't believe in a final judgment day, but in cycles of awakening and return. They didn't preach guilt and fear, but remembrance and ascension. They viewed Christ not as a sacrifice for sin, but as a symbol of Gnosis incarnate, a divine messenger whose purpose was to awaken souls to their own inner light. To the Gnostics, the Christ was not limited to a single figure in history. It was a universal principle, the Logos, the luminous force of divine consciousness that emerges when the soul remembers itself. This is why some Gnostic texts speak of a hidden Christ, a light that lives within all beings, a divine archetype that each of us must awaken from within. Consider this line from the Gospel of Philip. You saw the Spirit, you became Spirit. You saw Christ, you became Christ. You saw the Father, you shall become the Father. It is not about worship, it is about becoming. This is the sacred heresy, that the kingdom of God is not something to await, but something to realize. That enlightenment is not a gift bestowed from above, but a flame waiting to be uncovered within. And it is this flame, this divine spark, that the early church feared most. Because one who discovers their own divine nature becomes ungovernable. They no longer bend to dogma. They no longer fear death. They no longer serve power. They are power. So Gnosticism had to be buried. Its texts were outlawed, its mystics silenced, its knowledge driven underground. Only fragments survived tucked away in secret caves, passed between hidden circles, and rediscovered centuries later in the sands of Nag Hammadi. But the flame, it never truly died. Because Gnosis does not belong to history, it belongs to the soul. And when the soul begins to remember, the old knowledge returns, not from books, but from within. And that, dear seeker, is the true resurrection. It is one thing to hear about Gnosis. It is another to live it. The Gnostics taught that truth is not memorized, it is experienced. It is not found in a temple or a book, but in stillness, in inner light, in the sacred mirror of your own consciousness. So how can we, in this modern world of noise and distraction, walk this ancient path? The first key is self-remembrance. This was central to all Gnostic teaching, the practice of returning to yourself again and again, until you begin to feel the divine spark beneath your name, your identity, your story. Practice. 1. Inner gaze meditation. Begin each morning in stillness. Close your eyes. Turn your attention not outward but inward. Focus not on your breath but on who it is that breathes. Ask gently without expectation, who am I, beneath all appearances? Let this question echo through your being, not for an answer, but to create space. In that space, the true self begins to speak, not in words, but in presence. Practice. 2. Journaling from the spark. Before sleep, write from the voice of your inner flame. Not your thoughts, not your emotions. Ask, what did I forget today? Where did I act from illusion instead of essence? What part of me longs to awaken? Over time, this practice will uncover patterns, dissolve veils, and reconnect you to the part of you that never forgets. Practice. 3. Contemplation on the false creator. Choose a belief about yourself, perhaps I must prove my worth or I am not enough. Sit with it, examine it, ask, whose voice is this? Where did it come from? Is it a whisper from the divine or a residue of the Demiurge? This is the practice of inner exorcism, not of demons, but of programs implanted by systems that profit from your disempowerment. Practice 4. Sacred silence. The Gnostics were not merely intellectuals, they were mystics. They understood that some truths are beyond thought. So, create moments of sacred silence each day. No input, no stimulation, no distraction. Just you and the breath of the unseen. This is where Gnosis begins, not in noise, but in the womb of stillness. Practice. 5. Reclaiming the serpent. The serpent, once demonized, can be meditated upon as a symbol of divine intelligence. You can visualize the serpent rising from your spine to your crown, an ancient symbol of awakened energy. Let it wind through your being, dissolving shame, unlocking wisdom, and reminding you that your body, too, is sacred, not fallen. These practices are not rituals of escape, they are rites of remembrance. They do not require robes or dogma or holy books, only honesty, stillness, and the courage to descend into your own soul. This is what the Gnostics offered, and what made them dangerous. Not because they challenged the world outside, but because they awakened the world within. And when that world awakens, you no longer seek permission to be divine. You simply remember you always were. So now you know, Gnosticism was not banned because it was false. It was banned because it was liberating, because it whispered a truth that institutions could not afford to let you hear. that divinity is not something you must reach, it is something you must remember. That salvation is not a reward, it is a state of being, that the true temple was never made of stone. It was built within you before time, beyond dogma, beneath every breath. This is why Gnostic texts were burned, why their mystics were silenced, why the serpent was demonized, and why even today the idea that you carry God within you is seen by many as dangerous. But danger only exists to those who build thrones from fear. You, seeker, are not here to bow before illusions. You are here to awaken. And now, the question is yours to answer. Will you continue to serve a God you were taught, or begin to seek the truth you already are? Because Gnosticism is not a chapter in history. It is a call, subtle, ancient, eternal. A call to wake up, to see through the veil, to reclaim your spark from the shadows. And if something stirred within you during this journey, if you felt the soft pulse of remembrance beating beneath the words, then perhaps the flame has already begun to rise. So take this knowing with you, not as information, but as a mirror. And when the world tries to tell you what you are, return to silence, return to breath, return to that secret within you that no dogma can touch. Because that is where your kingdom begins. If this message resonated, share it. Let it find the others who are still sleeping. Subscribe if you wish to journey deeper into the mysteries that were never meant to be forgotten. And tell us below, what does Gnosis mean to you? Until next time, walk gently and remember what you truly are.